Greetings friends, it's Victor here and welcome back to another video. The other day I got a comment asking how to research companies that are gender and diversity inclusive, specifically as it pertains to potentially working for those employers. So that is what I'm here to talk about today. But before we get into the video, please do consider hitting the like button, subscribing to the channel, leaving a comment, all those good things. Okay. First, I would just like to say that this is very US specific, so if you are not living in the US, then I apologize that this may or may not be as relevant, but my experience is entirely in the US, and so that's what this is going to focus on. Okay, the very first thing that I think is very helpful when looking for a gender-inclusive employer is to reference the Human Rights Campaign's website. The HRC, or the Human Rights Campaign, basically makes and maintains this list of companies that are inclusive towards LGBTQ+ employees. Essentially, they just compile this list of companies and put it on their list of best places to work for LGBTQ+ people, and every year they come out with a new and updated list. So please go check out their website if you want that list of companies. Additionally, the HRC has started to make a list of companies that have transgender healthcare inclusive benefits. So that is also a vital resource to kind of get a feel for which companies may or may not be at least trying to be inclusive towards trans and gender nonconforming people. I would recommend starting with these two lists to start narrowing down which employers you might be interested in looking at or applying for. I believe as of 2021, the list of employers that are good to work for LGBTQ+ people is over 700 companies long, and so that is a really good sign because I think we were at like less than 500 just a couple years ago. Now, it's important to note and remember that just because a company is on one of these two lists does not necessarily mean that one, you will have a good experience there, or two, it's going to be all sunshine and rainbows. Okay, so maybe you're looking through one of these lists and you're like, oh, company A sounds interesting, company X also sounds interesting, let me go and see if there are open jobs, and maybe you see a job that you want to apply for. Now, personally, the first thing that I do when I'm researching a company in terms of, will this be a comfortable place for me to work when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion types of things, the first thing that I do is I Google any news articles related to the company, specifically as it pertains to transgender issues, or also other social issues, and the second thing I do is check out their website. So first, checking out news articles. Has the company made any public statements on just general diversity issues, general social issues? Oftentimes, if a company is advocating for a social issue, chances are they also are inclusive when it comes to other social issues, even if there hasn't necessarily been the opportunity to be public about said other social issues lately. You can also definitely check out their social media to see if they have made any of these statements. Definitely check out news articles, see if they have been lobbying, if they've been involved in politics at all, either positive or negative, if there are any donations or anything like that where they're actively and concretely contributing to a cause one way or another. The second thing that I do, which is, I think, a huge indicator, is check out their website. What I have noticed is that companies that tend to be pioneers and champions of diversity in one dimension often tend to also be pioneers and champions of diversity in multiple other dimensions, even if they may not be as visible. For example, you might get a sense for how inclusive an employer might be when it comes to gender diversity by looking and seeing, are they also inclusive when it comes to disability or race? Again, these are not the same issue and they are not a one-to-one correlation, but it can give you a good indication as to whether the leadership of that company values or does not value things like diversity. So, checking out companies' websites. The first thing that I look for on companies' websites are there people depicted on the website? If yes, then oftentimes the company is trying to set forth this image of being people-oriented, employee-oriented, customer-oriented, and generally that's a good thing. Now, when you're looking at companies' websites, remember that these websites, especially for big corporations, these websites are curated, okay? They are putting forth what they think is their best possible foot forward, okay? And so if there's something that is good, know that someone is behind the scenes there thinking in a very calculated way, okay, what am I putting on this website and why? If there's something on that website that looks bad or not good, then realize that there's someone also behind the scenes thinking, what am I putting forth and why? And maybe did or did not trigger on the fact that maybe they're not putting their best foot forward. And usually that's a bad sign. So here are some examples. I went to the HRC's website and I scrolled through the list of best places to work, and I also found their webpage where they listed a couple of places that are the worst places to work for LGBTQ plus people, and I just picked 2 random companies. So on the best list, since that list is very, very long, I ended up in the A's, so I picked Amgen, and I'm just going to go to Amgen's website and see what they have on their website. So as I'm scrolling through their homepage, I noticed that I see multiple people of color. I noticed that I see women as well as men. I'm noticing that I see people of different ages. Do I see anyone that is explicitly or very clearly trans or gender nonconforming? No. Should I expect to see that? Probably not. I don't think we're at a place in corporate America yet where people are actively putting, one person in a wheelchair and one person that is clearly gender nonconforming and one person that is, an ethnic minority, et cetera, on their websites. But the fact that I see racial diversity is a very, very good sign here. Okay, next I'm going to go to a company that was listed as one of the worst places to work for LGBTQ plus people. I picked ExxonMobil. So now I'm going to ExxonMobil's website and I'm just scrolling through their homepage. I see very, very little racial diversity. Almost everyone on this homepage is white. We do have some women, but in general, everyone looks the same. That's maybe not a great sign if someone was not actively thinking, oh, I should make sure I have clear visual diversity on this homepage. So to me, that's a little bit of a red flag. And in fact, ExxonMobil did score very, very low on the HRC's Corporate Equality Index. Okay, so now that I've identified a company that, one, is on the HRC's Corporate Equality Index, which tells me, okay, from a numbers standpoint, they're doing all right, and they're at least trying. 2, I've checked out their website. I know that they're at least trying to put their best foot forward in terms of diversity. I've checked out any news articles, and there are no red flags saying that they were actively, lobbying against, my rights. Once I have those 3 things done, now I'm to the point where I'm comfortable applying to the job and proceeding to an interview. Now, when it comes to applying to a job, realize that applying to a job and interviewing with companies is really a 2-way interview. They are interviewing you to see if you are a good candidate for the job and a good fit for the company, just as much as you are interviewing them to see if that company is going to support you as an individual and as a professional. With that being said, your safety always is of utmost importance, and so if at any point you do not feel comfortable disclosing your LGBTQ plus status, then do not. But if you are comfortable doing so, or you're using it as a feeler to see how that is received, then by all means go ahead. When it comes to applying to the job, consider things like putting your pronouns on your resume, or including under extracurricular activities or leadership things that are related to the community that you have been involved in or have been doing. Companies that value diversity and inclusion are going to see those things and are going to immediately pick up, okay, this person is maybe a part of this marginalized group. We are trying to have better, more diverse hiring practices, and so we are trying to bring in people that are gender nonconforming or gender diverse. So that's going to give this application a leg up potentially. Obviously, you need to have the qualifications for the job, and you need to have a strong resume, and you need to have good interviewing skills, and all of those things are basic fundamental things. Now, when it comes to the interview, this is one of the single most useful, helpful things to be able to figure out what a company's stance on specifically transgender issues are, or at least what the feel is for how it might feel for you as a gender nonconforming or non-binary or trans individual to be working in a corporate setting with this company. Last year, I made this video about me interviewing for jobs as a non-binary person, so go ahead and check that out if you want more specifics around kind of the interviewing process. But right now, I'm going to talk about how to kind of filter through whether or not this company might be a good fit for you in terms of being gender inclusive. Obviously, you need to have a very good interview. You need to be, if you're in a technical field, you need to be technically excellent, technically sound. You need to have good personable skills and be able to carry that conversation in the interview. And if all of that is done, if you've nailed that part of it, then this is the part that you want to focus on. If you're focusing on the LGBTQ plus issues without having that solid technical foundation or the solid interviewing skills or the people social skills, then unfortunately no level of inquiring about and talking about LGBTQ plus things is going to help you out. So the single biggest thing that I can recommend is just ask. So what I did when I was interviewing companies was I just straight up asked, what is your impression of company X as a place to work? Do you feel that it is a diverse and inclusive place to work? Do you have a sense for how a person like me, being very visually, clearly gender nonconforming, might be included or perceived or treated at this workplace? Do you think that would be a problem? Now, this is definitely a very forward tactic, so if you don't feel comfortable doing so, or you don't get the sense that your interviewer would be very responsive to that, then try something perhaps more covert. If you're interviewing on site at the company, do things like notice what other kind of diversity is around as you walk the halls. Do you see a lot of people of different races, different genders? Do you see like people that are clearly like from different places or cultures? Do people seem comfortable? Is there an overly strict dress code? Do you see that there is maybe multiple genders in the space, but that roles are relegated by gender? For example, maybe there are only women in the HR function and only men as software engineers. So pick up on those kinds of things, and that can kind of help you piece together, is this a diverse and inclusive place in general? Also try and notice, do they have any literature, any pamphlets for employee resource groups or business resource groups? If so, do they have LGBTQ+ or pride-focused resource groups? Do you happen to see any single stall or all gender restrooms? That can be a huge indicator. It's not necessarily a red flag if there is an absence of single stall or all gender restrooms, as many progressive companies are still coming up to speed in terms of facilities, and there are a lot of states in the US that actually have pretty strict like bathroom like zoning types of things, where like per square footage you need to have X number of bathrooms that are like gender specific. And so a lot of companies, based on location or just based on age of facilities, may or may not be up to speed with that. But if a company does have those things, that's a huge green flag in terms of, okay, they were actively thinking about this. They were actively thinking about either disability or gender, and they did concrete physical things to make it more inclusive. During the interview, you can also ask your interviewer if there are any opportunities to be involved with or contribute to diversity and inclusion efforts. Finally, something to consider is the location. Where's the company headquartered? Where is the specific site or location that you might be working at? And how does that play into the culture of the area as a whole? Obviously, if you have companies that are headquartered, or you'll be working in places that are in the US generally thought of as progressive, inclusive places, maybe outside of your work you won't have that much of a problem, and so maybe the expectation at work or in work is that it is just as inclusive as the surrounding community. However, when it comes to maybe companies located in more rural areas, smaller cities, less traditionally progressive areas, you might want to think about, you know, what does the surrounding community entail? Is the surrounding community going to be a place that is hostile for you? And if so, maybe consider that as well. I will note that I have noticed that several companies that are in less traditionally progressive areas do tend to be much more vocal about progressive issues because they are trying to kind of bring their communities up to speed. If you see something like that, that is often a very, very good sign in terms of the company culture and what the company leaders and the company itself values. Okay, that is all I have. Those are some of my tips and tricks for how to find inclusive companies. I did almost all of these steps exactly when I was going through the interviewing and job searching process a couple years ago, and so I hope you find this helpful. If you do have any questions or want any more specific details about some of this stuff, feel free to leave me a comment and I can potentially make another video or respond to the comments. All right, happy job searching. I hope you are doing very well, and I will see you next time.